In 2017, a paper came out that took the media by storm. It featured African wild dogs, which are pack hunters in Africa. They're competing with lions and hyenas for prey, but what they lack in size compared to hyenas and lions, they make up for with intelligence and coordination. So they hunt in packs, they communicate very effectively, and they are terrifying to be on the wrong side of. The paper that we're going to talk about today was concerned with the behaviors these wild dogs perform in the lead up to a hunt. So they're in a group, they're deciding whether or not to go kill yonder wildebeest, and there's some good things about killing that wildebeest. You can eat it, it's tasty, it's nutritious, but there's a risk. A wildebeest is very big, it could be violent, it's going to fight back, it's not going to want to be eaten, so there's a risk and there's a reward. As a pack, you've got to decide, do we do it? Do we not? And whatever the case, everybody has to be on board, because it's kind of a all for one, one for all type situation. No wild dog by itself can take down a wildebeest, so they need everybody's cooperation. The paper we're talking about today found in particular that there is a strong correlation between the number of sneezes per minute that a group of African wild dogs perform and the likelihood of them deciding to go on the hunt rather than sit back down and go back to rest. Of course, this is a wonderful headline. We've got dogs sneezing, we've got dramatic hunting in the plains of Africa. So, the headlines are everywhere. If we go to YouTube and we look around, we'll find videos like this. African wild dogs vote with sneezes. Wild dogs sneeze to hunt. This is kind of the popular science takeaway from the study. And it's a wonderful story, and, you know, it gets you thinking, wow, like I want to meet a wild dog so it can eat me. And it's not wrong per se. These dogs do have communal hunting behaviors. They are gauging each other's kind of assent to go on the hunt. There is sneezing involved, as defined by the paper. And yet, the picture overall is somewhat misleading, I think. Through no fault of the authors. I think the authors do a good job of being very, very clear about their definitions. It's the communication down the line that is the problem. Okay, so here is the paper itself, published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B. The article is named Sneeze to Leave. African wild dogs use variable quorum thresholds facilitated by sneezes in collective decisions. So a quorum threshold is a kind of measure of the proportion of a population that agrees to something, and once you exceed a certain proportion, you kind of flip the switch, and you do the thing. So this can happen biomechanically, so it can happen in a cell where you have a bunch of signal receptors, and once a certain proportion of the receptors are triggered, the cell will undergo some action. So this is different from a kind of iterative detection where every receptor causes a small impact to the cell. Rather here, there's no change at all until a threshold is met, and then all at once, the cell does the task in full. So we've got a similar thing going on here, but behaviorally. One dog wants to go on a hunt, but it can't get the team, there's no hunt. But once a large enough proportion of the group decide to go, all the dogs go. Okay, so that's the general story. African wild dogs are using sneezes as a way to measure whether or not a majority of their pack are interested in pursuing a hunt. So, let's have a look at the actual findings of the paper, and then think about them in the context of those media headlines from earlier. So, what did they actually find? Well, sneezing, so this is a specific behavior, dogs make a sound, is correlated with the success of a group of wild dogs embarking on a hunt. So, what they've done is they've gone to a bunch of packs of dogs. They've got 5 packs of wild dogs that they're measuring and monitoring. And whenever one dog gets up and starts initiating the kind of host of behaviors that go along with starting a hunt, they begin counting sneezes. And they continue to do this minute by minute until either the dogs depart on the hunt, so they set off, or one of the dogs lays back down and kind of gives up and then it fizzles out. And what we can see, looking at figure 1, is that for successful hunts, so this is hunts where the dogs actually leave, the mean number of sneezes per minute is fluttering somewhere between 1 and 1.5, with a fairly high margin of error. Whereas, in hunts where the dogs didn't depart, the sneezes are much lower, below 0.5, sometimes 0. Okay, cool. This is a strong correlation, right? We've got a statistically significant difference between the amount of sneezing that's going on for the dogs run off and the amount of sneezing going on when they don't. The authors posit a possible explanation for this behavior, which is quorum voting. So the idea is the function that these sneezes have, so we know that they're correlated, but we don't actually know why. The authors are proposing that the function they have is communicative. So the dogs are saying, I'm going to go. You're going to go, I'm going to go. We're all going to go. Cool. However, at no point in the paper did the authors claim that that is a true fact about reality. All they do is say, in our kind of best guess, this is probably what's going on. Now, they might be right. They might be totally right. But it seems like there are other plausible explanations for what could be happening. So maybe it's physiological. Maybe before you go hunting, you're going to go running, you want to clear your nasal passages, right? You want to get all the stuff out of your nose. So you start sneezing. And if you think you're not going to go hunting because of some other behavioral thing that you're doing, then you don't start sneezing because you think you're not going to go hunting. In that world, sneezing would still be correlated with successful departures, but it wouldn't be the cause. It would kind of be some third thing that was causing both the sneezing and the leaving to hunt. And we know that there are a huge number of behaviors that are going on. These are very, very complicated interactions. So, in lieu of further evidence, all we can really say is that maybe they're quorum voting. The authors don't make a strong claim. And yet, wild dogs vote with sneezes. Dogs vote by sneezing. Is what makes it to the news. Now, okay, so something's gone a bit wrong, right? It's not that this is even unlikely. Maybe this is the most probable explanation. But it's not something that we know about the world. It's just something that some people think. And that's not really a scientific idea. Okay. This is not my largest problem with the wider discussion about this paper. My wider problem is kind of semantic. You'll accuse me of it being entirely semantic, and it's mostly semantic, but I do think it's still important. So, when we say sneeze, what do we actually mean? Well, the authors define sneeze very, very specifically. They do an excellent job throughout the paper of saying sneeze, by which we mean an abrupt exhalation of air through the nose. It's atonal. They are high-frequency bandwidth noises that are stereotyped and obvious in rallies. So rallying is that general idea of getting the gang together to go kill a wildebeest. And sneezing is obviously a specific thing that the dogs are doing. It's not kind of blurred into a different behavior. You're either sneezing or you're not sneezing. Okay, cool. And we've got a spectrogram of what's going on. And it's pretty random, right? The dogs aren't making any specific sound. They're just exhaling through their nose. Okay, that's a sneeze. Here's the thing. When you read a headline, African wild dogs sneeze, we're immediately personifying them in a way that maybe isn't exactly fair. Because then what they're not doing is what humans do when we sneeze. They're not going achoo and having mucus and all the stuff come out of their nose. I can do what the wild dogs are doing. It would be like this. But in a human, I would call that a snuff or blowing out the nose. A sneeze in humans implies this kind of involuntary thing, which is just not what's happening. Okay, semantic. But the paper is very clear. This is what they mean. They're never kind of being vague. And they even bring up other behaviors in other canines, which are probably homologous. They're probably the same behavior, but they've got different names. So coyotes huff, which is defined as a short-range, low-intensity threat produced by expulsion of air through the mouth, but also the nose. Dingoes snuff, which is a nasal sound produced by the expulsion of air through nasal passages. And so what we have is a kind of semantic disclarity. We've got three words that all mean the same thing when a dog does it. And yet, sneeze is definitely the most confusing one of those to choose for someone who doesn't know anything about wild dogs, because it's the most humanizing one. And that also makes it a good headline. So, if we come back to the paper, it's not a chance that they've titled it Sneeze to Leave, right? That's a catchy title. It gets your attention. It gets you interested. And it worked. This paper has had great success. And that is a good thing. Like, this is interesting. Publicity is good. I'm glad that the authors are getting the recognition that they deserve. They've put a lot of effort into this. But the way it changes, the way the words become blurred out, I don't know. It feels like what we've had to do is say, well, if we just become a bit more ambiguous, become a bit more narrativized, then we'll get our ideas out to more people, and so we'll kind of get more interested in the science. And maybe that's right, but I don't think this is a problem unique to this paper. I think that a lot of science communication lives in the space of how can we make reality more fun and more of a story and more interesting to read or watch a 5-minute video of. But is it real? I don't know. If we come to the Wikipedia article for a sneeze, all this stuff it's describing is not what the research paper defines their sneeze as, right? This is semi-autonomous convulsive expulsion, is through the nose, but it's air ejecting forcefully, spasmodic, you're getting saliva and mucus coming out, you're doing it in response to disease or stimulus. This is not, this sneeze, this sort of Wikipedia sneeze, is not what the dogs are doing. The dogs are doing something very intentional and very functional, right? The dogs are trying to do it to communicate something or to get ready for something. There's a different kind of biological reaction. And yet, the final story of the Wikipedia article, we go through history, we go through culture, and we get to sneezing in non-humans. And there are 4 sentences and a picture of a sneezing zebra, which is highly compelling. Look at this wonderful man. He's just going for it. He's just sneezing. Anyway, there are 4 sentences. The third one is about African wild dog. And the sentence says, African wild dogs use sneezing as a form of communication, especially when considering a consensus in a pack on whether or not to hunt. Okay, but they don't, right? Like maybe they do sneeze using the definition the authors gave, but they don't use in the definition that this Wikipedia article gives, right? We're talking about like human sneezing. African wild dogs are not doing that. We've just used the same word. And now you're like, okay, Henry, this is a quibble, right? Like, this is a random Wikipedia article. But this is like common. This is the downstream effect of using ambiguous language to get media attention. now if someone's reading about sneezing, they'll come to African wild dogs and find out that they sneeze. And then that will propagate back upstream to future studies and confuse the dialogue. Now, okay, like maybe we have a slight misconception about sneezing. Is that bad? The problem is, what if we have a slight misconception about everything? I'm not a wild dog expert, right? I've done some animal behavior, but I'm not an expert. I can only talk about this from the point of view of someone who's kind of perceived it from the outside. And what I'm left with is a feeling of confusion, like I need another article. I don't know. Something about this just leaves me feeling deeply unsatisfied. So, if anyone has any ideas as to what this absence I feel from this story is, please let me know, because I've been suffering with this kind of sneezing wild dog shaped hole in my lower stomach for over a year now, and it's not coming out through the nose, is all I can say. Okay, anyway, fare thee well.